We've got several different stories to cover here from outside the UK. It's time for an episode of the World Newsround. Let's go. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. This is Reganelite here with an episode of the World Newsround, which is not something I do enough of, to be fair, where I cover various world news stories in a premiere video for you guys. I have 6 stories here to cover for you guys. The date and time of this recording is the 25th of October at about 14:52 p.m. UK time. This has been premiered on a Sunday, so for those who are watching on Sunday, I'm going to give you the quote of the day, which is something I've been doing across all my live streams. So today's quote for you guys is, "Believe in yourself and all that you are. Know that there is something inside you that is greater than any obstacle." Take what you will of that quote. That is today's daily quote. If you'd like to see the pictures in themselves, follow me across any of my social medias. Links are down below and you can check them out there. So the first story I've got for you guys is from NBC News. And that is Kamala Harris turns to the Democrats Party's biggest stars to make the closing arguments to voters. On Tuesday, the Vice President will deliver a major speech at the Eclipse at the site of Trump's remarks before the January 6, 2021 riots. And the Democrats have already been putting out big guns already in the last few days of the time of this recording. Beyonce, obviously, on Friday today, obviously, is going to be with Kamala Harris in Texas, is what the stories are. By the time you see this, that's probably be confirmed the case. Eminem was also with Obama and Tim Walz in a campaign rally in Detroit. And that in itself is big stars. And there's going to be even more other stars that are going to be turning up. I've seen several big stars online as well advocating their position to stand behind Kamala Harris and the Democratic Party for the sake of America. Because many Americans have really come out with really big guns and big high-ranked celebrities in the hope that people will not be poisoned by the minds of Donald Trump and the poison Republican Party, who claim to say that they are speaking on behalf of the American people. But their intention is to destroy the democracy of America, or what is going to be cascaded of it. This election in America will not just have ramifications on the United States. It will have ramifications for across the entire globe. Ukraine's survival pretty much depends on this. Russia's power and influence depends on this as well. If Kamala Harris wins, then Russia will not be able to break itself free from some of the sanctions that they have been imposed them since the war in Ukraine. I don't see much of a change happening in the Middle East, depending on who becomes the victor. But on one thing that I do know is that Donald Trump will stand aside while allowing Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to wipe Gaza off the face of the earth. He will turn the blind eye to that. He's very much on the camp of Israel. Kamala Harris is also on that, but I think there is a bit more humanity in her in comparison to Donald Trump. Project 2025 would also be initiated if Donald Trump is to succeed as well, which would break and tear apart pretty much many foundations that America's democracy was built upon. It's not perfect democracy that America has, but it is something that they're closest they have to. Polls have been saying that Trump is going to win. But polls don't always tell the whole story. And I think a lot of people will look at this election thinking that they have to think not just about their futures, but their children's futures as well. It really is going to be a tight one. And I really am hoping Kamala pulls it off. Because I do fear for the future, for the entire world if Trump wins. I really do fear in that sense. So let's read into this piece, guys, as they try to make their biggest push yet. So having spent the last month trying to persuade undecided voters to support her, Vice President Kamala Harris is now pivot to closing argument phase of her campaign and the list of party's biggest stars to help make the final pitch, according to three people familiar with the strategy. Harris is set to appear with former President Barack Obama in Georgia on Thursday, with the former First Lady Michelle Obama in Michigan on Saturday. The first time the Democratic presidential nominee will campaign with the Obamas this cycle. With just 12 days to go, the events are meant to be massive get out and vote rallies where the focus will be to encourage Americans to make plans to vote and vote early if possible, they say. A significant part of Harris's last push will be a major speech on Tuesday. She will deliver it at the Eclipse outside the White House, a noticeable location because it is where the former President Donald Trump spoke shortly before the January 6, 2021 riots on the Capitol. Without a shadow of a doubt, that's going to be a very powerful speech for sure. In the final days of the race, Harris is expected to stress that she still believes that she and her running mate, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, are the underdogs in this race and that nothing can be left on the field, Harris aides said. She's already delivered part of her closing argument, focusing on Trump and her beliefs that he would undermine American democracy and values if he was sent back to the Oval Office, two campaign officials have said. Her closing pitch to voters is expected to give less of a full recounting of her biography and focus more on the convincing voters that she represents the future for the country and would defend their day-to-day freedoms, officials said. She will also continue to slam Trump, stressing that he is increasingly unhinged and unstable, and she will argue that his desire for unchecked power is dangerous. In recent weeks, Harris has embarked on a media blitz, the key component of persuasion effort in the final stretch of the campaign. During interviews and most of her events, Harris has increasingly dialed up the warnings about Trump and used her own words to convey her concerns about potential return to power. Harris has also started using video clips of Trump's comments at her rallies, a pattern that is expected to continue. Harris campaign aide said the strategy is viewed as a smart way to force a conversation about him. A huge part of our thinking is that we need to show his lack of fitness, the person said. Another campaign official said the campaign's internal polling shows that suburban and independent voters in the final days of the cycle can be effectively moved by showing actual video of Trump and at Harris's rallies in a way that she has not been done before. Another key part of the closing message will be about differentiating herself from President Joe Biden, repeatedly the vow that her hypothetical administration will not be a continuation of this record, according to another Harris campaign aide strategy. This is one thing that a lot of people don't want. A lot of people do not want a continuation of Biden. She has to convince people that as well. She said, "Yeah, I've heard this interview a few times. This phrase a few times. I bring my own experiences, my own ideas into it, and it has been informed a number of my areas of focus," Harris told NBC News in an interview today. "I've been traveling the country and I'm very clear. The cost of groceries is still too high. The voters know it and I know it." Harris will seek to talk about specific economic policies to lower living costs, from everyday expenses to more affordable housing, the Harris aide has said. She will continue to put out new plans, according to campaign co-chair Robert Garcia, who stressed the end of the race will be about creating a contrast and choice with Trump. Trump's comments continue to become more bizarre and more strange, and that is something that should concern the American people. And in the closing gaze, Garcia told NBC News on Wednesday, Kamala Harris will make that argument. And they will continue to make that argument as much as they possibly can. But we are edging ever closer now to it. These rallies are getting, the really, really matter. I just wonder how, for me, it's not so much just about the result itself, but also the aftermath of the election is going to be questionable as well. And I can generally see a lot on the Trump side calling it rigged before it's even counted. I do unfortunately see that coming, guys. And they've been making the moves behind the scenes in the run-up to this election. They have been making the moves already. And it's going to be it's going to be very problematic, that is for sure. I do have generally concerns about this, but cross our fingers and hope for the best is what I could say for myself and everyone outside of America. The next story I've got for you is one from Al Jazeera, a very interesting one indeed. Canada is to reduce the new immigration by 21%. So the immigration controls will limit the country to 1.1 million newcomers from 2025 to 2027. This is a very interesting policy. Now, as we know, that immigration has been a key subject going on around globally. And it looks like perhaps Canadian politics are being influenced by immigration as well. Let's read a bit more into this, you guys. So Canada has announced it will slash immigration for the first time in years, a major policy shift for the Liberal government as it tries to reverse its unpopularity and remain in power. So from 2025 to 2027, Canada will bring in a total of 1.1 million new permanent residents, a 21% drop from the previous year, the government announced on Thursday. The temporary number of residents, meanwhile, will also decrease by about 30,000 to 300,000 to 300,000 in 2025, Immigration Minister Mark Miller has said. The government says the plan will pause population growth in the short term to achieve well-managed sustainable growth in the long term. Interesting. The new immigration target represents a break from the COVID-19 pandemic era when the government eased restrictions on temporary residents to fill labour shortages. Last year, Canada had planned to bring in 500,000 new permanent residents in 2025 and the same amount in 2026. As of the second quarter of 2024, there were 2.8 million temporary residents, including workers and students, in Canada, according to Statistics Canada. The government statement suggests that the country's post-pandemic needs has evolved after immigrants had met business demands to aid the economy recovery, as they were blamed by the right wing for putting pressure on housing infrastructure and social services. Yeah, this is the problem. Everything that goes wrong in your country, the easy scapegoat that that people on the right now use is immigration. Today's announcement is the next step of our plans to address the evolving immigration needs of our country, Miller said. While it is clear our economy needs newcomers, we see pressures facing our country and must adapt our policies accordingly. We didn't get the balance quite right, Prime Minister Jordan Truscott said of the change in policy. The plan will bring in 395,000 new permanent residents in 2025, 380,000 in 2026 and 365,000 in 2027, down from 485,000 in 2024. Trudeau has lately faced pressure to step down amid slumping poll numbers and the rise in support of opposition Conservatives. Canada has long prided itself on welcoming newcomers, but in recent years, the national debate around immigration has shifted in part due to rising housing prices, the Reuters news agency have reported. Many Canadians have been priced out of the housing market since interest rates started rising 2 years ago. At the same time, an increase in the number of immigrants has pushed Canada's population to record levels, further boosting housing demand and blamed for a rise in prices in some quarters. The issue has become one of the most contentious Canadian policies, with a federal election due no later than October 2025. Public surveys show a growing share of the population thinks Canada has too many immigrants. Now, obviously, I don't know enough about Canadian politics, but this is obviously the best scapegoat that people on the right can use now. It's the normal policy to blame immigrants for everything. And that's how it comes across to me anyway. There's been a backlash against new immigrants and more reports hate crimes against minorities, advocates and community members say. Immigrants advocates slam the change. We are witnessing one of the most egregious rollbacks of migration rights in Canadian history, Sig Hassan, spokesperson for the Migrant Rights Network Secretive, said in a statement. Cutting permanent resident numbers is a direct assault on migrants who will be forced to remain temporarily or become undocumented, pushing further into exploitive jobs. Canada's 3-year immigration controls are projected to cause its population decline by a marginal 0.2% in both 2025-2026. Next year, population is expected to shoot back up by 0.8%, according to the government. These changes will help provinces, territories and stakeholders align their capabilities and allow the population to grow to a sustainable pace as we encourage institutions to do their part in welcoming newcomers, the government has said. It does. I do feel like it is without a shadow of a doubt, it's an attempt to just keep, from this government, to maintain the status quo and try to appease to those on the right who generally believe that immigration is all their problems here. That's definitely how it comes to be. You know, next year is going to be big for Canada. I don't know enough about Canadian politics to speak on this, but obviously these numbers reducing their immigration. To be fair, their immigration is quite I think, yeah, based on the numbers, they're probably quite high. But they're obviously, their population is not the same as other countries. So they do rely on immigration, obviously, to help boost their economy. But to some people, it's seen as too much reliance on immigration for the economy. And they're obviously using that as a scapegoat to blame for why they have rises in certain house prices and certain other infrastructures that haven't been improved on. And they're saying it's because we're letting too many in. So we need to tone it down so that there's more homes, more jobs, and all these kind of stuff are for Canadian civilians rather than immigrants. So there's a catch-22 situation that this government finds itself in from the looks of it. That is for sure, you guys. But obviously, Canadian politics is not really my protege, but it is something I want to share because obviously immigration has been something that is a global discussion. And obviously Canada is one that we don't really talk about here on this channel, that's for sure. Now, obviously, when it regards to world economics, is not my protege either. But I do think this is something we should take heed upon as well. This one is from the BBC, you guys. So the International Monetary Fund warns the world to avoid global trade war. Yeah, I don't think anyone wants trade war in any way, shape or form. The International Monetary Fund would not be saying this unless there was something to this, if I'm honest. So the world economy could contract by the size of the combined French and German economies if there is a broad-based trade war between the world's major economies, the International Monetary Fund has told the BBC. It comes as concerns as heightened ahead of a possible re-election of Donald Trump. And Trump says he plans to introduce a universal tax or tariff of up to 20% on all imports into the US, while the European Union is already planning retaliation if Washington goes ahead with this new levy. Last week, Trump says tariff is the most beautiful word in the dictionary, and global markets and finance ministers now beginning to take seriously the prospects of him enacting the idea. IMF's first deputy manager director, Giga Golopov, said the fund could not yet access the specifics of Trump's trade plans, but thinks that if you have some very serious decoupling and broad-scale use of tariffs, you can end up with a loss to the world GDP as close to 7%. These are very large numbers. 7% is basically losing the French and German economies. That's the size of the loss they would be, she continued. So basically, Trump would F up the world economy by by importing these on those imported into the US. But what's it that Trump votes say America first, isn't it? You know, who cares if the entire world buzz around America? Mr. Goldbeast also said tariff worth hundreds of billions of dollars is very different from the world that we live in over the past 2 or 3 decades. The IMF deputy chief said another of the fund's main messages is at its annual meetings was to warn on ballooning levels of global government debt. She said the current period of steady economic growth was a movement to rebuild your physical buffers, as this will not be the last crisis. There will be additional shocks. You will need the physical space to respond, and now is the time to do it. Mrs. Gosopis said it was also necessary to look at the bright side with a resilient world economy after some very tough knocks. She suggested the world economy has seen a soft landing from multiple crises. Yeah, I would say that. I would agree, especially after COVID. You know, the war in Ukraine has definitely had and conflicts that have still been taking place that have an impact on it as well. I definitely think what's still happening in the Red Sea, you know, global trade is affecting the world economy there because of Houthi rebels blocking trade going through there because of what's happening in Gaza. So that's obviously had an effect as well. The Suez Canal what country is it in Central American countries. Someone will mention it in the premiere video, I know. But they've had to reduce obviously global trade going through there because obviously there's not enough water supply to enact to continue. Well, they can still obviously initiate global ships going through the Suez Canal, but the problem is that it's the lack of water for it. They've completely drained one of the ponds that's been, well, not completely, but they've drained over the last several decades. They have drained the water from that canal because that is really important, obviously, because it stops global shipping going from the likes of from the likes of Australia, New Zealand, China, Japan, who cross over the Pacific and obviously want to travel to the Atlantic, to Europe. Sometimes they'll go through that Suez Canal, and obviously from the western side of America, or west and Chile as such, Chile and Colombia on the western side of those nations who go through the Suez Canal onto the other side into the Atlantic Ocean, obviously, so they can ship their trade supply, and obviously, rather than them obviously, it costs more, and it takes more time obviously to take trade and supply going all the way around of South America, because there's quite a lot of land there. So the Suez Canal is obviously a key, I think, a very key component of the global economy there. But yeah, they have actually reduced the amounts of ships that can go through at a time. It used to be a lot higher, but they have reduced it. Over the last few years, they have slowly reduced it. I definitely covered it in a video quite a while ago on that. So there was talk, obviously, about introducing a second one of some sorts. I know there were other proposals, but obviously that's part two. She suggested the world past experiences bringing down inflation has not been a soft landing, but it was a big increase in unemployment. So that was a big hit, and it turned out to be much better than many feared, she said. Mrs. Goldenpage added that it was a good win for central banks everywhere that inflation has come down without higher unemployment, but that now was the time to rebuild resilience in a fragile world. Yeah, the world is extremely fragile, and the one thing that's definitely happening in a global economy point of view is that we are seeing, while there is obviously still foreign aid and support coming to countries that desperately need it, there has still been, it's not as much as it used to be. Not just the UK, but other nations have been less in doing so, because of the perception and reality that social media and mainstream media have been pressing on this need of looking after themselves as opposed to looking after thy neighbor. This is definitely something that has been a change as well. There are certain countries that are still maintaining the status quo for themselves. The Nordic countries, specifically Norway, Sweden, Finland, for example, those countries have been pretty much stable throughout all these situations, shall we say, in the last several years. But there's not been enough in terms of, one of the biggest gripes that I have is not been enough when it comes to dealing with countries in Africa. We've still, especially Europe, who are responsible for many of the destructions there from their history. There's colonial times. There's not been enough yet to help those economies out, help the conflicts out, and not to ensure more stability in it. Responsibility falls on the past of those who have caused the damage and scars on that continent. And we've continued to, we have thrown money at some of the problems, but it's not always about money. It's actually about getting down there and actually doing something about it as well. But it's we don't want a global trade war, and this is another reason why we do not want Donald Trump back in as well. As if you didn't have enough reasons not to want Trump back into the White House. The next story I've got for you guys is from Middle Eastern Eye. This one here is: a third of European Muslims are unable to buy a house due to discrimination, the EU finds. So EU's leading rights agency has identified a worrying surge of racism and discrimination against Muslims across the region. This is sadly a report that I'm not surprised by, and I don't think anyone watching this should be surprised by this. Without a shadow of a doubt, this has increased not just because of what happened on October the 7th, but I even think if you go far back, it's even as far back as when 9/11 occurred. You know, the perception on Muslims, unfortunately, the perception has changed by it. You know, a lot, and the rise, obviously, of conspiracy theories, misinformation, disinformation. People are there's still this, unfortunately, there are people with this mindset that Muslims are a problem in society, when in fact that is not the case. They are, just like many others, just trying to make a life for themselves. Not all of, we're talking about minorities, minority Muslims who are causing trouble in the EU, but unfortunately a majority of them find themselves in struggling to make a life for themselves because people don't want them simply because of their skin color and their religious beliefs, which is problematic. So the European Union's leading right agency has identified a worrying surge of racism and discrimination against Muslims across the EU, caused in part by dehumanizing anti-Muslim rhetoric. A new major survey of 9,600 Muslims across 13 EU member states by the UN Agency for Fundamental Rights, the FRA, has found that Muslims are relatively deprived and face high levels of discrimination. These findings show that nearly 47% experienced racial discrimination, up from 39% from 2016. The figure was highest in Austria, where 71% of Muslims reported they have faced racial discrimination, and in Germany the figure was only slightly lower at 68%. This discrimination often results in material hardship for a large number of European Muslims. A survey found that a third of Muslims could not buy or even rent a house because of discrimination, up from a fifth of Muslims in 2016. And almost half of Muslims stopped by the police in the year before the survey thought that their last stop was a result of racial profiling. Meanwhile, a third of Muslims said their household struggles to make ends meet compared a fifth of households generally. However, although the findings they have just been released, the survey was conducted before the October 7th Hamas-led attack on Israel. That's interesting. And Israel ensuring war on Gaza. Over the last year, the FRA said there has been a rise in anti-Muslim incidents. FRA Director Serbia Raskio said, "We are witnessing a worrying surge in racism and discrimination against Muslims in Europe. This is fueled by conflicts in the Middle East and made worse by dehumanizing anti-Muslim rhetoric we see across the continent." The survey canvassed Muslims in 13 EU countries: Austria, Belgium, Denmark, Finland, France, Germany, Greece, Ireland, Italy, Luxembourg, the Netherlands, Spain, and Sweden. The FRA has called on the EU and its member states to properly enforce anti-discrimination laws, as well as tougher sanctions for discrimination and hate crime, as well as eradicate discriminatory institutional practices and cultures that lead to unlawful police profiling. This comes after several Muslim civil society groups in Europe warned last year that they face a climate of state-sponsored Islamophobia. In Austria, the far-right Freedom Party received the most votes of any party in September's general election, while in Germany, the anti-immigration alternative for Deutschland has seen a surge in support in recent months. And in 2022, France, the European Union, and Egypt objected to the creation of a United Nations recognized International Day to combat Islamophobia, a resolution proposed by Pakistan. This is obviously, I want to stress as well that this is obviously specifically EU, but I also think this, if you were to ask, if it wouldn't take me 5-10 minutes for me to find polls that indicate that this is probably a similar thing in the UK, as well as potentially in some non-EU countries that are not in favour of Muslims. I'm also going to say probably in America is probably having the same issue as well. We need to stop looking at people by their race, by their skin colour, or by their religion, and by who they are as a person, rather than characterising them by things that actions that other people or other people of their religion have, or people of their colour have caused in the past. We need to stop this discrimination. It's pretty much just the message. If we don't stop discrimination, it will continue to happen, and people will continue to suffer as a result of it. And we have to call it out when it happens, and those who does it and think it's acceptable need to face the law, need to face punishment for it, because we cannot allow this to be an acceptable thing. But we are letting it become an acceptable thing because not enough is being done about it, and this is one of the problems that I generally believe that we have. Not just in the EU, but many places in the world as well. So guys, we have just 2 more articles to go through. Just want to remind you, if you haven't already, please hit the like button. We greatly appreciate it. If you share this across social media, your others will be notified of this video, so they'll be informed of some of the stories that happen today. If you haven't subscribed already, if you've checked this out and maybe some other videos on here, please consider subscribing, because that really does help support the channel. if you want to go one step further and financially support me in the work that I do here on this channel, you can do so by becoming a YouTube member for just 99p. It may not sound like a lot, but 99p really does make a massive difference, and you get lots of perks in doing so. You get access to custom emojis. That's the first thing you get, so you can use them on live streams and premiere videos like this one whenever are there. And also, as well as early access to additional content as well. You also get access to membership community posts as well that you get out of as well as whenever you comment on any of my videos as a YouTube member, you'll always get a response. So you get all these things just by being a 99p member. So thank you to everyone who has been a member or has renewed or has been a member, renewed, or is still a member today. Thank you very much. It is greatly appreciated. Other ways you can financially support me. If you wanted to leave a super chat, you're more than welcome to as well. You could also buy me a coffee. Link is for that. It's in the description, or join Patreon. If you join the Patreon, you also get exclusive content on that platform as well. Whether you are a paid member or a non-paid member on Patreon. And you also, if you want to check out the Rumble channel, I know it's not available in certain countries, but if you do have access to Rumble, do consider following me on there as well. On there as well, as I potentially cover news stories and articles covering specifically in the Middle East, specifically what's happening in Israel, Gaza, and Hezbollah, Lebanon as well. So thank you to everyone who has done any of those things. It is greatly appreciated. Shilling over, let's go to the next story, guys. This one is from Reuters. So Moldovan president said bribery affected election and pledges a runoff vote. So this was at the time of this. Obviously, this is just under a day ago now. So we are getting, like I said the aftermath of this is going to be the interesting phase of how things are going to go since the EU referendum that they've had here on whether they want to vote to join the European Union. Obviously, there's still a long way to go for them to actually do it. And we know that obviously there's been a lot of Russian interference within the country, something that the Kremlin has denied on several occasions as well. We covered this a couple of days ago on the channel as well. But obviously the presidential election will be a key thing as well, because there'll be a lot of people trying to bribe those to vote in the interest of Russia rather than in the interest of their own choices. Moldova wants obviously to be, I would say the majority of the population wants to be a part of the European Union because they want better opportunities and prospects for themselves. And I really hope that does come to pass. So Moldova's pro-European president said on Thursday that mass bribery had affected the presidential election and the referendum on joining the European Union, but vowed to press on with a November the 3rd runoff to win a second term instead of ordering a new election. Mina Sandu issued her pledge saying it was up to the people to determine Moldova's future, after police said pro-Russian fugitive businessman Elian Shaw had channeled $39 million to voters in September and October. To that further, the November runoff vote is going to be massive. Moldovan authorities have said the campaign for last Sunday's dual poll was overshadowed by a massive Russia-linked election meddling scheme aimed at defeating the pro-European Europe side. Without the buying of votes, the outcome today would be different. We would have had a convincing victory in the presidential election and a referendum to vote on social media. She said she had rejected suggestions that ordering a rerun of the ex-Soviet states election, as no one has the right to deny our citizens a mass, sincere expression of their will. I think there's a cost to running another re-election as well. Plus, it's no guarantees that they would keep Russia out if they did reapply another election in doing so. Now, some people may argue that it was only a tight margin of 8 that people that said yes. But we have to count the Russian interference was massive. Was the Russian interference massive in the Brexit referendum? I don't think it was in the Brexit referendum in R1, but it definitely had an effect there. Could it have made the difference between us leaving and joining? I can't answer that question if I'm honest. But in this case, I suppose some people will ask you, because it was so tight, maybe there is an argument that there should be a second one. But I don't think there needs to be. I think if you went on the ground and asked most people, they would say they would want to join. I think, yeah, from from my understanding. But I could also see the argument of why some people want a second one based on this result. Let's go forward with the second round. We count strictly on our people, as has always been the case when the fate of the country is on the line, she said. It was up to the judiciary to wake up and tackle the issue of bribery, she added. Sandu came in first in the presidential election but failed to secure 50% of the votes, and now faces a runoff against former President Alexander Shoshko, who is backed by a traditionally pro-Russian party. And that's the fear. Yeah, if the pro-Russian party gets back in, it will undo the progress that Moldova has made. Sandu has singled out Russia as one of the biggest threats facing Moldova and made EU integration the cornerstone of her administration. In the referendum, surprisingly slim majority compared to opinion polls, 50.46% of the voters supported EU accession. The police have accused Shaw of an attempt to bribe 130,000 voters. He denies wrongdoing, and the Kremlin denied interfering. It questioned the vote count, in which voters from Moldova abroad pushed the yes vote to over 50%. Moldovans abroad helped push it over the line. Interesting. That is very, very interesting indeed. Yeah, so pretty much that's... there was obviously a couple more still counts to come in, but they did enough. They did enough to win this vote. Now it really does. Moldova's future hangs on this second, on the runoff. If she pulls this off, if she manages to stave off her opposition, if they manage to keep out Russian interference, and if she manages to hold on to power, then Moldova will perhaps push even further away from Russia, and perhaps maybe even start enforcing more powers to ensure of less Russian influence within Moldova, perhaps de-corrupting a lot of Moldova from Russian influence. Let us hope so. Anyway, that does end up coming to be the case. I really hope so. That does turn out to be in the end, but time will tell on that. But yeah, it's about what day is the 2nd of Russia? 2nd of November. It's on a Saturday. Interesting. So it'll be on the weekend when that runoff will be on. So that will probably be, it will be the next weekend, that one. So it'll be interesting to see the following week, obviously, what the outcome of that will be. So the last story I've got for you guys here on the World Newsround. I know it's not, World Newsrounds are not really as long as some of the others, but I wanted to get some out there for you guys here on a Sunday. This one, so we have talked about North Korean soldiers obviously potentially being a part of the Russian army. What the F to do with them? Russian soldiers heard condemning North Korean recruits in an intercepted audio. Now, I don't know if there's actually, or if the audio is actually going to play here. Let's have a little listen. I don't know if they're going to play audio here or not.
I also want to talk about...
No, they're just, it's just actually talking about, it's just actually something else completely different. Hold on a second. I'm just going to try something. Here. I could edit it out if need be, but let's just have a listen.
Really incredible new information, which is that South Korea's spy agency says that North Korea has sent at least 1,500 troops to aid Russia in its war in Ukraine. We have even video of North Korean soldiers receiving Russian uniforms and equipment at a Russian training base. It just reminds us, Colonel, how connected a lot of these countries are that are adversaries of the U.S. and its allies. How alarming is this? How should the U.S. and its allies respond?
Well, this is alarming. It's not the first time something like this has happened.
This is the first time of myself seeing North Korean soldiers in this.
In fact, during the Korean War back in the early 1950s, the Russians...
Well, you can clearly see the person doing the handout there. That is definitely not Korean. But if we look again at some of the faces there, they definitely look like that they are They're definitely from Asia.
Would actually be the pilots of North Korean planes, North Korean fighter jets. And that is something, so I guess we could say that the North Koreans are paying the Russians back finally for those services. But the key thing is this: now we have another power potentially getting involved in the war in Ukraine. It shows that Russia has a manpower problem. They also face significant domestic resistance to actually being drafted into the war in Ukraine. So the way to solve that manpower shortage appears to be to hire foreign troops. And in this case, those foreign troops are North Korean. And that, of course, means that North Korea is more directly involved than we previously thought. And that potentially widens the conflict beyond just Ukraine-Russia. It could also impact the Korean Peninsula. And of course, the U.S. has vested interests both in Europe and on the Korean Peninsula.
It'd be interesting, yeah. I mean, I guess there has been since this talk about North Korean recruits, and Russia have denied this, North Korea has denied this, but this video footage is very, very clear here. This is obviously from the Ukraine Center of Strategic Communication and Information Security there. You can clearly, like, I obviously don't know what a Russian national's face looks like, so you guys in the chats will have to make that clear. But it definitely looks like it there to me. This is the first time I've come across actually video footage. So there were obviously, South Korea was very hesitant, and they've been quite hesitant to directly support Ukraine. This obviously may incentivize them to do more now for Ukraine, now that this footage has come to light. And this, and like you said, it will have implications in the Korean Peninsula. But what kind of implications are we talking about here? I don't know. One thing I do know is that North Korea, pretty much the majority of their men and boys in their population have to go through military training. It's compulsory. The vast majority are pretty much soldiers anyway. I think very, very few don't go through military, end up becoming other things, but the majority end up do. But this obviously here, this headline, what the F to do with them? I would love to hear this audio. I'm not sure where I'll be able to find it, but I'll see if I might have a gander after this video and see if I can have a dig and see if I can find the audio for this. But still, I do have to laugh a little bit because it's like this is something that we spoke about before, actually, when we talked about on the Snowflake conflict about North Korean soldiers. Like they're not going to have experience. They're going to be in a completely different world. And it looks like already the Russian soldiers are like, what are we supposed to do with these guys? Just throw them out there with a gun and expect them to like hold a position or something? Like I'm trying to imagine a Russian commander or general in charge of a unit full of North Koreans, and there's going to be communication problems. There's going to be yeah, I can see a lot of things going wrong here, that's for sure. But this point about him saying that they're running out of soldiers, Russia, I don't buy that. I honestly don't buy that. I really don't buy that because of Russia has such a big population. I find that very hard to believe, personally. And they've already enacted more Russian soldiers to join anyway. And they'll force more to do so if they have to as well. So let's read a bit more into this. So Russian soldiers have been heard raising concerns about how North Korean soldiers will be commanded and provided with ammunition and military kit. Leaked interceptors obtained by Defense Intelligence for Ukraine and released on Friday shows. The Russian soldiers talk distastefully about the incoming North Korean soldiers. Codenamed the K Battalion, at one point referring to them as the effing Chinese. That is so racist. In the same extract, a serviceman described another who had been tasked to meet people. And he is like standing there with his eyes out like, like F, the soldier says. He came here and said, what the F to do with them? The audio was intercepted from an encryption Russian transmission channel on the night of October 23rd, according to Ukraine's defense intelligence. Ukraine's analysis of the intercepts revealed that North Korean troop movement were planned for the morning October the 24th in the area of Poskin-Adorovy field camp in Russia, Kursk region, where Ukraine launched a surprise incursion earlier this year. The intercepts have also revealed plans to have one interpreter and 3 senior officers for every 30 North Korean men, which the Russian soldiers are heard in the audio condemning. The one thing we don't understand is that there should be 3 senior officers for 30 people. Where do we get them? We'll have to pull them out, one Russian serviceman said. I'm effing telling you, there are 77 battalion commanders coming in tomorrow. There are commanders, deputy commanders, and so on, a serviceman said in another extract. I'm assuming these are North Korean ones helping out, because you would need some of them to help, especially with communication. The intercepted audio follows a Thursday announcement from Ukraine's military intelligence service that a group of North Korean soldiers have been spotted in Russia's Kursk region, an area that borders Ukraine, and seen ongoing military operations. In a post in its official Telegram account, the Defense Intelligence Ukraine said some North Korean troops who have received training in Russia's Far East have made their way to the western region, where Ukraine has maintained their foothold since launching the incursion in August. President Volodymyr Zelensky said on Friday he received a report of the deployment of North Korean military personnel from Ukraine's commander-in-chief. According to intelligence, on the 27th, 28th of October, Russia will deploy its first North Korean troops in combat zones. This is a clear step in Russian escalations that matter. So by the time you see this, this may be already happening. Unlike all the disinformation circulating in Kazan these days, Zelensky said, criticizing the BRICS summit staged by Russian President Vladimir Putin this week in the southwestern Russian city of Kazan. The Kremlin had initially dismissed allegations of North Korean troop deployments, but on Thursday at the BRICS summit, Putin did not deny that Pyongyang had sent soldiers to the country. The actual involvement of North Korea in combat shows should be met not with a blind eye and confused comments, but with tangible presence on both Moscow and Pyongyang to comply with the UN Charter and push and to punish escalation, Zelensky added. Interesting. Very interesting. So we've talked about this already on the Snowflake conflict, this incursion. But this is the first time obviously seeing video footage. And now you have audio of some of the Russian soldiers, you know, kicking, screaming, swearing their heads off of like, why do we have to deal with this? Like, why? Like, what? We can deal with this ourselves, sort of thing. And some of the Russian soldiers who are very pro-Russian against the, who are for this war, some of them will be like, well, we're taking land anyway. We're winning the war, so why do we need them? This will be some of the arguments. And obviously, you already have some Russian soldiers who are in this war against their will anyway, because they've been pushed into it by the Russian government, because many of them have been forced into it against their will. So you're kind of already you're already making things worse for them, and than they already are. Now, there's obviously this says a couple of things. So obviously, Kim Jong-un has made it very clear he doesn't care about his people. If you didn't get that already, well, you're going to get it even more, because he's sent them halfway from one side of Russia to another, and basically said, "You guys go to you guys die for Vladimir Putin and Russia and Mother Russia and my friend Vladimir Putin. Basically, you all have to go and die for." Right, and they've all been put on, and you can see it in that video clip there of them putting on Russian equipment and all that kind of stuff as well. It's very, very interesting. It's fascinating, but at the same time, it's sad as well, because they are being, like innocent Russian civilians are being forced to put on the uniform and fight for Russia, even though they don't want to, because there's many men and young men forced against their will to be conscripted to the Russian army. Many North Koreans who don't want any part of this are now going to be pushed into a war that basically has nothing to do with them. Literally nothing to do with them. So many of I don't know how much. Some of them are not going to be as straightforward and minded as we are. They're literally just going to be yes bodies. They literally do as they're told, and they're just going to go out there. I can just see so many of them. So many of them are going to die needlessly, and they didn't, and they will not need to die needlessly. And it's really sad as well. It's really, really sad that is going to be the case, unfortunately. So, but guys, before we wrap up the World Newsround, I wanted to give you guys at least a funny video before we head out. This one here is from a Foil in Arms one. It's actually one I haven't heard before. So what I normally do on some of my premiere videos and live streams, for those who are new here, I like to play a funny video. Sometimes I play it, most of the times I play them in between. But because of how much content I covered today and how we went through it, decide not to do one midway point, and instead we're just going to have one funny video here at the end of this premiere video. So for those who are here from the premiere, this one is entitled "If the Food in Your Fridge Could Talk." So yeah, so just imagine your fridge full of food and they started having discussions among themselves. So that's the best way to imply this story. Anyway, I hope you guys find it at least amusing.
Did they close the door properly?
Yes, Milk, they closed the door.
Right, yeah, but properly. Like, did they close it properly? Because I can feel a warm draft. Does anyone else feel that?
I'm not sure I'm meant to be here.
No, you're meant to be in here.
Well, I don't know, because Eggs was just telling me that...
What's he doing here?
I don't know, you see, him and Chocolate were talking...
Chocolate? He's not supposed to be here.
Yeah, but Bread told him that...
Bread is in the fridge?
Does anybody know what is going on here?
Oh no, here comes Butter.
Butter? Were you scared of him? He's a real soft.
No, not in here.
What are you looking at?
Nothing.
How are you, Butter?
You. Yeah, get lost, you big bunch of losers.
Pickles, fridge door.
Oh, cooked chicken. Just moved in.
Oh, well, you'll get used to it in here.
Fresh meat coming through!
Don't mind them, they're lifers. Condiments think they own
Oh,
the place.
look at that! I like to spread myself on that! What is that smell?
That was disgusting!
Oh, get back in your box! Oh, man, we stink. Shut up. I'm just saying, we really smell.
Oh, yeah?
I mean, you're not even chicken anymore. You're just a carcass.
What's the matter with you? You want to go in the bin?
No?
Yeah, it might be cold in here, but it's better than the goddamn bin.
Anyway, it's been great chatting to you.
Yeah. See you later, bro. Red wine, what are you doing here?
I don't know. They must be students or something. Absolute degenerates.
Who are you?
Who am I? Everybody's bad decision, I guess.
Sliced avocado.
Here.
Whoa. You look rotten. How long you been here?
2 minutes?
Oh, what's going on? Where am I? Get me out of here!
Now, he's definitely not meant to be here.
You know, I think they've forgotten about me.
Yeah, I think so.
Me too.
Lettuce, is that you?
It used to be. Let's get out of here. I'm a monster.
What was that?
No, I think it's a...
No, please.
It's a power cord!
Doomed up.
They didn't make it, guys. They didn't make it. I don't know about you, but that's not how lively my fridge is. But maybe your fridge is that lively, and you just haven't opened it. Maybe at the end of this video, guys, you will take a step downstairs or from your dining room table and just see if your fridge is up to something. What do you guys think? Do you think there's something suspicious going on? For those who don't know, this is the gang behind me. Ollie the octopus, who sits on top of the all-powered orb. The orb is what empowers the channel. Pingu, the communist penguin, who just came back from the Briggs Summit. Had a great time there, apparently. And had some interesting discussions with Putin about penguins and protecting the penguins across the globe, which apparently those discussions went very well. I talked about that already on the Snowflake conflict. And then Cash Dummy, the cookie monster, there as well. For some reason, it's been pushed behind Pingu. Might be because he come back from the Briggs, potentially. But anywho's, let me know what you guys think of some of the stories that we covered here on the World Newsround. So we covered, obviously, Kamala Harris and the ramping up of the Democratic Party's push, and as they get to the final hurdles. Canada looking to reduce immigration in their country. The IMF's warning of the world about global trade wars that could be coming. Also talked about a third of European Muslims unable to buy houses in the EU. What do you guys make of that story? The Moldovan president said the briberies affected the election and pledges on runoff votes, which is on the 2nd of November as well. And then finally, obviously, what the F to do with them with regards to Russian soldiers complaining about North Korean recruits in an intercepted audio. So let me know your thoughts about all these stories and more down in the comments section below. But just before I go, if you haven't already, please hit the like button, be greatly appreciated. Share this across social media so others are notified of this video. If you haven't subscribed already, please consider subscribing because it really does help support the channel. If you want to go one step further and financially support me and the work that I do here, you can do so by becoming a YouTube member for as little as 99p, or you can join me on Rumble or Patreon for exclusive content on those platforms. So thank you all so much for watching, and I hope to catch you all very, very soon.